everybody. Sorry, I'm trying to make this actually constantly doing what I can to try and make this actually work so that it can, that may be a little bit better, but yay, you get to see how dirty my office is. I'm trying to get this to where it will actually work and put together with the dual streaming. And so I'm running a little bit late. I apologize. I hope everybody is having a great day. And oh, fuck off. And apparently I can't do things like share things. I apologize. And of course I'm going to cuss. But we're going to go over a couple of things with Neanderthal again today, as we've been doing for the last few lives. The book that I'm working on, it's not a book, the articles, I'm trying to decide what to call it because basically it's the first of a chapter, or it's the first chapter of a series on things like right to life. This one itself is on the right to life. That might work. Hi. Hey, Sylvia. So I think we're right on track for publishing by the end of this week. I'm thinking Friday, but it might be a little bit later, like Sunday if need be, but it will definitely be by Sunday. With that, it takes 5,000 people to get on the bestseller lists, and it's a free book. So if like half of my followers went and bought it, we would be on the bestseller list and we would get it up there, which is basically what I'm looking for. I just want this message to get out. And when you read it, I think you'll understand, because I think that most people that come in here and listen or talk to me really follow this. This right to life idea is about what it entails to have the right to life, what the right to life entails. And so really hoping, also, I now have a website going, and that is in my bio. I will be releasing it through Amazon because I can publish it freely through Amazon, and because you can buy it freely through Amazon. And so that's where I'm going to go ahead and put it through, because it's the only way that I can think of that I can do it that's easily accessible for everybody, and I can do it completely freely for everybody. And so it will be through Amazon, and I will be posting like a book thing so everybody can see it. But I have a website up now that I have set up, widdaord.com. And it is in the bio. And I have a link to the link tree on the website, because what I'm going to do is transfer all the sources from the link tree over to the website. So if you go to the website, you'll see that there's a list, either across the top or a drop down on your phone, that gives you Homo erectus, Homo neanderthalis, migration patterns, DNA, and so that you can actually click on it and get like bibliography by different subject, instead of having to scroll through a whole bunch of stuff to find things. And so that I'm working on transferring everything. The website itself is up. I did that yesterday and finished up on the paper yesterday. So the website itself is up and going, and we've got like a couple things that have a couple links on them. I'm transferring all the links. The link to the link tree is there so that you can find those links for now. And this should also make sure that things are there, because I think sometimes I don't know that things aren't there because it's such a long list and I have to sort through it, that I can't find things. So I have long COVID. It's really hard to breathe sometimes. And so I get kind of short of breath sometimes, especially when talking. And then I have all these other issues that kind of compound on that. So please understand my shortness of breath. And actually, I think, I did. So I figured out why subscriber comments wasn't working, and now it probably is on subscriber only. So I'll go ahead and turn the comments on for a hot second as we get set up. So the book and the website, this will be the second to the last on Neanderthals' DNA and language and hearing. Right, long. It's horrible. This will be the second to the last. Our last on this subject is going to be tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And then we will be moving into art and self-decoration within the Neanderthals. And we will do 4 episodes on that as well. so that we can actually get a broad scale of people getting through, give a week of, different time zones and different, times so that people from all around can get in. And then we'll be moving into the next. We're going to do a few of these, probably no more than four. So probably no more than a month of Neanderthal. We might toss a couple other things in there as other things pick up and roll across, but we'll see. I might be changing the Sunday night one to a Monday night one, but then I'd be doing Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, which becomes a little bit hard. So I might have to adjust and look at that. But my daughter goes live and does makeup and tutorials and chats on Sunday night, and I like to be in her lives. And so I want to make sure that both are being accessible for both of us because she's also a mod in mine. I'm a mod in hers. So with all of that, um, I'm picking up and I'm getting going. And with the new year, there's a lot of different things that I'm getting going on. And so we're going to see that the website's already up. Um, as soon as I get the logo finished, then I will have the access to uh, sayings, different verbiages that I've been asked to, I want that on a t-shirt or I want that on something. So I will have access to that coming soon as well, as soon as I get the logo going. And then I'm going to start publishing probably once a month these pamphlets in this series is my aim with the publication is it will be a series of pamphlets, a series of I want to say treatises, but I'm not going to get into that deep Western academic micro language and micro examination. I'm just going to let you guys use the logic that I know that you guys have with just a couple of thought processes, right? Because to me, it's not about teaching you exactly how to think, it's about giving you information so that you can take that forward thought and digest it and find your own information. Because to me, knowledge is about it's about desire to learn more, right? It's about the ability to learn more, and I think that that's something that's really interestingly specifically human, right? And so I'm not trying to force you to drink. I'm just showing you the water. And so it's not really a treatise because it's not that in-depth micro examination, but a treatise is the closest that I can think of. So it will be an ongoing series of small treatises on different things, different politics, different rights, different effects within humanity, kind of like chapters of a book. And it will be once a month. And again, the first one will be out by the end of this week, and it will all be free. And it will all be free. So, all of that said, let's go ahead and let's get into today's subject. Again, this is the third on our series, the third on the first chapter of our series on Neanderthal. And what we are looking at here is a Neanderthal human being butchering what looks like a deer. Sorry, I know my hand's in the way. This is a Tom Borkland image. Tom Borkland is on Insta and Twitter. Amazing fucking artist. He does a lot of beautiful artwork on Neanderthal and early humans. His Venus of Wollendorf is like just gorgeous. And his recreations are generally very honest and very to the understanding of what we have. So, what we know with Neanderthals is that yes, they are lighter of skin, but their lighter of skin is not Northern European white, right? Um, yes, they have red hair and freckles in their genetics, just like early Homo sapiens had in their genetics, and we as Homo sapiens have in our genetics. Um, yes, they have that in their genetics, but the expression that we're getting is not the ultra northern pale white that we get today that we think of as white skin or light skin. What we're seeing is probably more Mediterranean of what we think of today at its lightest, probably to me at its very ultra lightest, but not really lighter than that. And you may not be able to tell because of lighting, but I'm not very light. So what we're seeing with Neanderthals is there is lighter skinned Neanderthals and there are dark skinned Neanderthals. Neanderthals is a descendant of Homo erectus, just like we're a descendant of Homo erectus. And Homo erectus speciates in Africa, and we've proven that the gene for light skin goes back 900,000 years. But Homo erectus having that gene doesn't get that gene until 900,000 years ago, which is already 1.1 million years into their existence because they're 2 million years old, right? And so, with that, what we're seeing, we're going to turn off the comments. With that, what we're seeing, sorry, one second. If you would like to comment or ask questions, I am over on YouTube. You can find me there as well. There's several people over there, over there. And it's a little bit easier and it kind of keeps the trollish down. Um, and it kind of keeps me from being distracted because it's on the side screen and so I don't see it as easily. So what we're finding is that the gene for light skin is 900,000 years old. But that's 1.1 million years into Homo erectus's time. They've already got a lot of subspecies going, including Homo heidelbergensis. And the Homo heidelbergensis is a subspecies or descendant of Homo erectus that speciates into us, right? When they speciate into Neanderthal, because it's the other species they speciate into, in Europe, they're carrying that light skin gene, but they're also carrying that dark skin gene, right? And so they have both genes within, just like we have both genes within. And us speciating in Africa, we speciate darker of skin on the whole, right? Not meaning that there's not some light skinned people popping out from here and there. Still is, still are, right? Because of recessive genetics. But meaning that the whole of the population that continues is darker of skin, which is the species advantage. Light skin is not the species advantage. And therefore, you're seeing the same thing within Neanderthals, just kind of switched. Like where we're population whole is darker of skin with some light skins, Neanderthals population whole is lighter of skin with some darker skins, right? So within this, you're seeing that Neanderthal is not going to be uber, alter, translucent white like we want to think of white, right? Caucasian isn't even that. Caucasian is North African in the Levant area and the Mediterranean. So we need to adjust that. We also need to adjust our theory of race. We've already talked a few times about how race theory has been debunked and race does not exist. Culture and heritage absolutely exist. Ethnicity is a part of culture and heritage. That absolutely exists. And racism is unfortunately structural in many of our societies and therefore still exists. But race does not exist. We have more genetic differences within a population than we do between primary populations, meaning originating populations before colonization. And so, because of this, when we're looking at skin color within Neanderthal, we need to understand that it is a variety and that the light of the variety is not the ultra pale, right? When we're looking at Neanderthal genomics and when we're looking at Neanderthal DNA, it's important to understand a couple of facts. One of this is we've only been able to test the genome for Neanderthal for like 20 years. Pablo Svante Pablo, I always get it backwards. Svante Pablo is the man who just won the Nobel Peace Prize. He is a geneticist, I think, out of the Max Planck Institute. And about 20 years ago, he invented this thing called polymerase chain reaction, PCR. And that's what he won the Nobel Peace Prize for. Polymerase chain reaction gives you the ability to sequence the genome in ancient DNA. So when you're doing DNA testing on something that has died, well, first let's understand that DNA, like every other substance, has something called a half-life. And a half-life is the rate of time it takes for that substance to decay by half. Therefore, in small arbitrary numbers, if your DNA is 100 strands of DNA and your half-life is a day, then every day you lose half of that DNA. And if you start at 100 strands and that first day you lose 50 or half, you end that day with 50. Your second day you start with 50 strands, and by the end of that day you've lost half or 25, and you end that day in 25. By the next day you have 12.5 or 25 strands, By the end of the next day, you've lost 12.5 of those strands, and you end the day with 12.5 strands. This is what half life is. It's the rate of time it takes for something to disappear. Hi, Kenya. Sorry, I'm always saying hi over there, even though my camera's over here. Um, so, oh, sorry, 1 second. Okay. So, with that, we see that sorry, I just got a text and I need to process it through my weird brain for just a hot second and get back to where I was. So with the invent of polymerase chain reaction, what happened was when we're testing ancient DNA, you have to destroy the evidence. Like you have to destroy what you're doing to test it. So if it's a bone, you have to destroy the bone. If it is, a piece of skin or, some of the new things that they're now able to test, you still have to destroy that. So when they found Denisovian, they found a fingertip, a phalange, and when they found that, they ground it up completely and then they mixed it with a solution and they spin it to centrifuge out and tease out the little particles. Now, if you're only getting a particle or two particles of DNA, right? And you you know, have to test these two particles. You haven't had polymerase chain reaction, right? You can't test just two particles. A, you need more DNA than that. And B, you're destroying each particle that you test. So it takes dozens of particles to test, and then you've destroyed all those dozens. So you can only run one test on those dozens of particles. Polymerase chain reaction takes the DNA that you can find and it replicates it by millions. So if you found two strands of DNA, you now have 20 million strands of DNA. And so now you can test and test and test because you have the replication. Ancient DNA is anything that's dead. So really, uh, somebody who has died a month ago is considered ancient DNA when it comes to testing because of the fact that the rate of decay can change by environment. If you're in an extremely cold and dry environment, your DNA degrades slower. If you are fully submerged, like underwater or in a bog, your DNA degrades slower. If you are in a very hot and very wet environment, your DNA degrades swift, right? So if somebody is in a Florida bog or Florida, swamp, their DNA is going to degrade very swiftly. So with the invention of polymerase chain reaction and the first full testing of the Neanderthal genome that Svante Pablo did, we have found this amazing wealth of information in Neanderthals. Most recently, there has been a new testing coming out of, again, the Max Planck Institute, where Svante Pablo is from, but from a different scientist, that gives the ability to actually test the soil of caves or finds. Kind of like you test the soil for carbon 14, this tests the soil for DNA. And this test of the soil from DNA gives us the ability to look at a timeline of the DNA history of that cave floor. And this has given us even more information. So the things that we've teased out from these two information abilities are the fact that the Neanderthals were never a hugely genetically diverse group of people, that there was about 500,000 of them as a species whole across the entire timeline of their existence, which is about 570,000 years of existence. And it should be noted that we are 300,000 years old, and the Neanderthals were 300,000 years old when we were born, when we started. So they were our age when we come into the plane of existence. Really new information tells us that by that time they had started losing their Y DNA, in fact, and that in fact we can't find Neanderthal Y DNA. There's a couple theories on this. One is that it was replaced by Homo sapien Y DNA. We have two periods of extinction that Neanderthal went through and had a repopulation after, um, and are almost extinction, near extinction. And we're not sure if they lost their Y DNA completely and replaced it with a different gene, because the SRY gene is the gene that the Y DNA is attached to. But in humans, it's actually fading. And it won't mean that males will go, it'll mean that the Y gene is gone and that males already will be born without the Y gene, and still be male. Um, what this means with Neanderthals is a couple of different possibilities. Either that is what happened, that their Y gene faded out and they replaced it with a different chromosome, whether it's another X chromosome or another letter of a chromosome. I'm not sure, right? And we're not. Or if they replaced it with the or with the Homo sapien Y DNA. Good morning, Caroline. Good morning. Hi, everybody. Um, so with that, I should actually probably move this here if I am like actually got like 4 people over on YouTube. We don't usually have a whole lot of people on YouTube. So with that, what we're seeing is that Y, um, I would not agree with that statement, Kenya. Um, I'm gonna have me review it, but I'm not gonna. We'll talk about it in another time, but I would not agree with that so much, just because of the fact that I think gender is too much of a construct, right? And and that is about the construct of gender, not so much about the biology of the body, right? And the concept of what that means. But just to acknowledge. So with that, what we're seeing is that it looks like either they replaced it with ours or it just spread out like ours is. Again, this does not mean that you lose males. It does not mean that you lose needing 2 different biological sexes to create the next line, right? It just changes the biology of male because currently Y only codes for one thing, and that is that switch of gender. Everything else in Y that was necessary has translated to a different gene already. And what is left within the Y gene itself, which we can see is actually like fading, like it was already a fade, and the gene itself was already a fade of an X gene, and we can see that it's even fading more. Um, Everything that's currently there is not important to the code of humanity other than that switch from uh, female genitalia to male genitalia that happens. So with this, we're also seeing that there are other species that we see within our DNA and within Neanderthal DNA, and Denisovian DNA that we haven't found yet. We've talked before about ghost species a little bit. And, there's not a whole lot more to say about ghost species other than they're species that we see just a little bit of them in our DNA. So we know they existed. But because it's just like a brush of them, just like a fingerprint of them, we don't know what the whole genome was and we don't know what they were, right? We just know they're there. So the newer studies coming out are showing that we're actually finding more species as we look at Neanderthal and Denisovian DNA. There has been a very recent study talking about a new possible species in Europe. I'm not sure if that's one that they see within Neanderthal and Denisovian DNA or one that they see within Homo sapien DNA yet. And there's a couple others that have come out through Neanderthal and Denisovian DNA currently that we know never bred with us, but bred with Neanderthal and Denisovian. And then we know of 5 ghost species that we ourselves bred with that make up our DNA. There are 2 populations in Africa. I'm going with 3 because that's 2 populations within Africa. The Oyo population and the Khoisan population do not have Neanderthal DNA, but they have 3 ghost species within them. Nobody is pure Homo sapien. Got told today that certain people are pure Homo sapien, and I would like to double down that nobody is pure Homo sapien. We all have other species within us, right? Admixture is kind of part of Human is admixture. Like, if we see something unusual, if we see something that looks new and different, we're attracted to it. Think of that. Like, we're always looking for what's over the next horizon. We're always looking for the next spark. We're always looking for the new idea. Even today, we're always looking for the next invention. We're always looking for something that sparks our interest, correct? So, if this is the case, then you have to look at the fact that it is very much a part of human nature to have curiosity about something that you don't know. Curiosity about something that you don't know does not mean you kill it. It means you get to know it, you learn it. It is that getting to know it and that learn it that took us from Homo habilis's first invention of stone tool to a phone. It is that I don't know what this is and I want to learn more. It is that somebody sees something and thinks differently than I do and I want to learn how they think. It is that something is different and I want to learn what it is that takes us from stone tool to a phone. Okay. And because of that, we know that when we see other species, along with a lot of evidence, we know that when we see other species, we breed with them, we mix with them, we live with them, we interchange ideas with them. It is in the time of 100,000 years that Neanderthal and sapien lived side by side in the Levant that you see the the most, no, a massive amount of the mixture that we see in our DNA today start to happen, are happening, right? And it is also in that time period that you see both Neanderthals and Homo sapiens tool assemblage change. And it is this meeting of minds that changes the tool assemblage because this box meets this box and it shatters both boxes. When this box, oh, I forgot the camera does weird hand signal things. Sorry if I fucked that up. Because when this box meets this box, it shatters both boxes. We see this even today. When an old box and a new box, when your box meets somebody else's box, your theory and ideas change. That's why they say you should travel. That's why you should meet new people in different cultures, because when you learn something new, your box changes, right? Your thoughts change. And this is where invention happens. This is where spark happens. This is where growth happens. So we see that the vast majority of mixing with Neanderthal, Homo sapiens, Denisovians, and all the other species that they are coming in contact with is this mixing of humanity, family, right? We're also looking at the fact that or looking at what seems to be a composition of bands instead of tribes. Tribes are families, extended family groups, okay? Whereas bands are different groups united in one group, right? So a band might be a Denisovian and a sapien and a Neanderthal and a Naladi, though we don't have any genetics for Naladi, so I don't know. But 7 of these other ghost species, right? 6 of these other ghost species in this band, and all of them living together, right? All of them working in the harmony and in that um, mix and communal support that is required for the next generation to get old enough to give the next generation, right? Because you need an extensive community to raise a child from birth to the age of complete development, which probably around 20 years old in this time period. It's 25 years old when the frontal lobe closes in our time period, right? So having that need a broad community, you're seeing that those broad communities are bands, not tribes, which means that you're seeing many different species living together in the same group of people, right? Um, we're seeing that with the Neanderthal these days. And the other thing that we're really seeing as well is that Neanderthals' genetic diversity by the time they left was so narrow and so low that they were like father or not father and child, but like cousin intermarriage, uncle to niece, aunt to nephew. Like the intermarriage is so inbred by the end of the Neanderthals time period that uh, they're really having to reach out to other groups to get their DNA from, to get their genetics, right? So that they don't run into things like the Habsburg jaw, so that they don't run into the mutations that come with inbreeding that cause insanity or lack of viability, right? And so with this, you're seeing that in the Neanderthals reaching out to all of these other species and breeding with these other species, this is the Neanderthals' Hail Mary. This is the Neanderthals saving themselves. Neanderthals don't go extinct. We have more Neanderthal DNA on the planet today than we had during the entirety of their existence. Again, 500,000 is the species whole during the entirety of their full genomic time on this planet, right? As an individual species, right? Of 8 billion people, roughly 7 billion people, because I'm pretty sure that the Oyo population, the Khoisan population are not a billion people on their own, probably a few million, but not a billion. So say 7 billion people uh, with Neanderthal DNA. That is absolutely more Neanderthal DNA than even having a full genome in 500,000 could ever give you, right? So Neanderthal doesn't go extinct. Neanderthal carries on in us. Neanderthal never makes it into Africa. The reason that there is Neanderthal DNA in Africa is because, again, you see that the Neanderthals and the Homo sapiens lived for 100,000 years together in the Levant. And when they're living in that time in the Levant, they're migrating home. They're going home. And when they go home, they take their children and their grandchildren who have Neanderthal DNA within them home. And then they stay there. And that DNA gets transmuted into the group that they're in there, right? And this is how we see Neanderthal DNA in Africa pre-colonization, because these tests are done on findings pre-colonization to ensure that these tests are done real and without the impact of colonization, right? Um, so seeing that Neanderthal DNA is in all of Africa except for these two populations, we also know Neanderthal never makes it into Africa. And so what we understand is that that mix within the Levant takes the Neanderthal DNA back into Africa. Um, it's also what takes Homo sapien DNA up out of Africa into Europe, because again, we see that Neanderthals don't have a Y DNA afterwards, but where we're seeing a Y DNA in Neanderthals, we're seeing a Homo sapien Y DNA. So again, it could be a replacement of Homo sapien Y DNA, or again, it could be that they no longer needed Y. They had another chromosomal name, right? Or another chromosomal configuration, right? Um, and so with that, you would absolutely see that they breeding within themselves would have that chromosomal configuration, but that they could also have the Homo sapien Y. And what we see is that the Homo sapien Y comes into them at about 285,000 years ago. So this is a very early breeding before the breeding in the Levant. This is at the height of an interstitial period, so low glaciation, so a warm period. And we're seeing that in the lower part of Asia, Eurasia, and the Levant area and the Mediterranean area, we're seeing that there is an influx of Homo sapien Y DNA in those areas with Neanderthals. Um, this is before you're seeing that meeting in the Levant. Um, so most likely what we're looking at is another meeting in the Levant area, or an earlier exodus that we're just not seeing in the fossil record of Homo sapiens, because we don't see Homo sapiens in the fossil record until further on, right? About 50,000 years ago in well, the earliest in Eurasia. One second, I'm going to look over here. Absolutely, Mish. The Habsburg jaw is absolutely from the very, very big inbreeding within the Habsburg royal family. And actually, it's what ended the Habsburg line, is because of their inbreeding. There is Habsburg line still existing, but those groups actually sought outside genetics, though many of them are still really inbred as well. The English royal family is cousins, right? Like well, the next generation didn't marry their cousins. Charles and his children didn't marry their cousins, but uh, uh, Elizabeth and Philip were cousins, right? And that's pretty standard. And they were actually Habsburg descendant. They just changed their names, right? Um, but we do see that inbreeding actually destroyed the Habsburg royal family, and that they had to reach out elsewhere. And that a lot of our Western culture is really inbred like that, because most Western philosophy, most Western science, and things like that, if it cannot trace back to ancient Greece, it doesn't validate. Like, people won't allow it to be valid unless it traces back to ancient Greece, which can be very inbred because it doesn't allow new thought in, right? We're sticking with the same old thought for 3,000 years, right? We're not getting that influx of new ideas. So I'm going to go ahead and open up for questions for a couple within TikTok. And then afterwards, oh, the jaw. So the other thing that we have is we have something called a Boiner. Let me make sure I've got the pronunciation on this one right. Jaw. Not in that page. It isn't this page. This page. No, 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 no. One has too many pages open. One can tell. One can tell. Okay, I'm gonna say it's Boiner. I was reading on it this morning. I know it's open, but I'm not seeing it. Okay, we have a Boiner jaw. And this is a find that's over 100 years old, but they're now examining it because it's so long. Oh, awesome. Can you, okay, so good morning, everybody. She's holding meat in her hand because she's skinning an animal. It is true that Erectus was more diverse than we are. Though I do need to state that with Erectus, we haven't gotten DNA, but we know that they're more diverse because we know they have all these subspecies, right? That, came along, and we can see it like in one singular uh, fire gathering, right? Or, one singular group of people, you see several different morphologies that we classify as different species. Like, you'll see Heidelbergensis and Ergaster and Rudolfensis all within the same site, and they're all classified under Homo erectus, like subspecies of Homo erectus, but like, you can see the differences in morphology that gives us this idea that they're very diverse as a species. Yes. Really, most anybody these days probably descends from an Habsburg line, just like most of us descend from either Charlemagne or from Genghis Khan. Like, kings have a propensity for passing along their genetics. Get a soft speak filter. Don't correct me, motherfucker. Take it somewhere else. If you don't like the content, you can scroll the fuck on. But telling me how to do shit, unless you're actually helping me do it, is wrong. No, and all I'm doing is publishing on a treatise, a critique of the right to life and the way the government is using the right to life. That's what I'm publishing. It's a critique on the right to life, and it will be a series of. First, I'm doing a critique of rights. I'm doing a critique of rights and what rights actually mean. Um, and so that will be about 3 different articles, and then, or chapters, and then I'll probably move into a few other things. I keep a lot of my political content off of TikTok because TikTok will ban me. And so I keep a lot of my political content off of TikTok. The writings will be very much into political content, into um, into more in-depth thought process as well. I will probably go into something on a different paleoanthropological species, but it will be less of a focus on paleoanthropology and more of a focus on politics and decolonization, because those are things that it's a little bit easier to talk about in writing, with community guidelines. Yes, but rights come with a responsibility. Every inalienable right that you have comes with the responsibility of ensuring that everybody else has the same inalienable right. If it's inalienable, it means that we all have it. You start removing other people's inalienable rights and you lose the right to your inalienable rights by your own choice, right? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and give it a couple more minutes, and then I'm going to go ahead and turn off comments, so that I can read through and answer them. I'm not sure what this issue is. That's not true. We have the right to be alive, right? We have the right to life. That's a pretty inalienable right. And yet somebody else can remove our right to life if they kill us, right? So, um, let me go ahead, and again, I'm giving you a couple more minutes. Let everybody get a chance to comment. And then I'll go over, and there's a couple questions in YouTube again. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm turning this to sub only. It gives me the ability. Sorry, guys. Didn't mean to knock you down. Fuck right the fuck off. I know, I cuss all the time. My camera's trying to fall down on me for YouTube. Hold on a second. Trying to fix that. Let me scroll through these and I'll go ahead and answer what I can. Thank you. So basically, I'm an archaeologist and anthropologist. Did healing before I did archaeology and anthropology. I have degrees in Western degrees, and I also was raised Indigenous and did Indigenous medicine and studied history and stuff like that before I got Western degrees. Um, I don't believe that education should be kept behind a $40,000 a year paywall. And I do not believe that education should be gate kept by really large words that even people with extensive vocabularies have to go and look up 3 or 4 in a paragraph. Um, so it's not necessarily a college lecture. What I do is I just try and give and impart the information that I have about us as a species so that people can understand the beauty of us as a species in a better way. Because I believe that if we understand that we are nurturing and communal, kind, and that we don't other naturally, and we're not violent naturally, and that we're naturally not into killing each other and hoarding things, that maybe I can change your perception of yourself, and that maybe I can change this really depressing death sentence that we're in, right? And so that's what I do. Good morning, Canada. Cree, I'm not sure what you think I'm saying. They're just random words. Did the loss of Y have any other impact on the Neanderthal that caused them to disappear? No, that doesn't seem to be why Neanderthal disappears. It seems to be that Neanderthal gets so genetically narrow that they disappear because they can't produce viable offspring in and of themselves. They kind of die out due to a mixture of that and climate change, like no longer having an environment that they can live in anymore. Um, so it's between those two things really that seems to have caused them to have disappeared as a genomic whole. As for the soft filters again, like dude, I can't even. I don't know. I'm barely TikToking. Literally, barely TikToking. I've been here since July. Think I'm doing pretty good, but I'm barely doing this. I don't I'm old. I'm X. And backwoods and off grid was my childhood. I don't do technology at all. I didn't see a computer until I was in middle school, high school. Like, I y'all weird. This shit weird. I'm trying. The aspects of their morphology for Homo erectus that is more diverse is their skull morphology, really, though there is a few differences like in body morphology, like maybe fingers are a little different or maybe toes are curved a little differently, but not a whole lot. The main aspect of their morphology that we see that's different for different subspecies of Homo erectus, like ergaster and Heidelbergensis, is the different shapes within, like what's their jaw shaped like? What's their nostril appendages shaped like? What's their eyes like? Do they have a brow ridge? Do they have an occipital bun? What's their skull shaped like? I do think that the inbreeding kind of affects the fading of the Y in the DNA of Neanderthals. I also think that there's that genetic narrowing of their species for a hot minute twice, right? So if they were almost extinct twice, they get this huge genetic narrowing, and that huge genetic narrowing gives them that kind of leads to the loss of the Y, to my understanding of what we're looking at, and it also leads to that inbreeding, that lack of genetic diversity. Thank you all. This photo behind me is a Tom Borkland image. Tom Borkland does a lot of art on early hominins. His are all like paintings, digital art. He is on Insta, he's on Twitter. The name is up behind me, though I don't think on Insta it has the umlauts over the O. But you can find him in both of those spaces. He's also, I believe, in the link tree. I am adjusting the link tree over to a website because it's hard for me to find things in the link tree. So I assume it's hard for you to find things in the link tree. And there will also be a list of different artists who do paleoanthropological art on there as well. But he is one of them, and he's pretty frigging amazing. And I like this picture because if you're looking at this, you can see that she's skinning a deer of some kind. She's skinning, or I think it could be he. I mean, it's very gender non-specific, right? But I guess that's just my auto. So, and we do actually see that it is the Neanderthal females who are hunting and who are larger physically as well. So she's seems to be skinning a deer, and what I like is you can see on the deer, on whatever she's skinning, that she's the way she's skinning it, right? So if you can look at that white membrane, that membrane exists between the muscle and a hide, and when you're skinning, you can slice, and then you can actually just kind of pull that hide up. It'll get stuck from time to time, and you can take a knife into that time to time, and you can kind of just like brush against that membrane, and it will dissolve that membrane. And you can see on this where that membrane actually, she had to do that slice. So if you look near the elbow on this deer, right, you can see that really dark spot right there. You can see where she had to kind of take a slice on that membrane, and it kind of nicked through the membrane to the musculature. So for me, having grown up skinning animals, this is so realistic. It's so hyper realistic. And I love the color palette of this one. And this one is really pretty to me. Oh, good morning, Johan. Johan? Johan. Please let me know if I'm pronouncing that correctly or wrong. Um, so I'm going to go through the rest of these questions, and then I will get to the questions on TikTok as well, or on YouTube as well, just because I'm not seeing a whole lot that are really different than what we've gone over to. But I will go over and make sure that I'm getting all of them. Life is defined at first breath. Like, the definition of life in all dictionaries is from first breath to death. And the Bible defines life at first breath. I'm not a biblical person. I could care shit less what the Bible says, but a lot of people seem to. And it defines life as first breath. All things define life as first breath. It is not a heartbeat when a heart doesn't exist because a heart doesn't exist yet. It is literally um, energy transference through cells that you are registering like a heartbeat, and it's not a heart. So, pro life uh, is not about life, it's about destroying people, right? It's about thinking that you have the right to control another person's body. It's about removing the right to liberty and bodily autonomy. But pro life has nothing to do with life because there is no life inside the body yet. It is an incubation period, right? And I'm not your incubator. Um, so the political content will be printed content, again for free. I will be publishing the first of them by the end of this week on Amazon. Currently, it's like 15 pages. It is not a big thing. It's a quick read. It's just an ideas, and it's inviting you to hear more and to see more, and to research and to do your own thought processes. But that will be the political content. It will be published in written form because of the fact that trying to do political content in here doesn't work very well. Um, and it will be on Amazon and it will be free on Amazon by the end of the week. I will be putting out when it is free on Amazon and when it has been published so that everybody can get it. If we can get like 5,000 people to buy it, it hits the bestseller lists, which would be fucking epic for a free publication. And a first publication and a piece, like and getting out the knowledge on the right to life, which I think that most of the people who follow me once you read it are really going to relate because you relate to this and the different thought processes that we talk about. And it's really along these lines, but it goes more into what's going on. How does a new species show up? That's pretty important. So, speciation happens when a group is isolated from the rest of their species and they adapt. So it takes 100 generations for an adaptation, but it takes several adaptations and several hundred generations for a group to turn into a separate species. The way that it was explained to me in school was pretty cool. What they talked about was deer here in the United States. And what they talked about is a herd of deer that has a summer pasture and a winter pasture, and they're on either side of a mountain. If you look in the Pacific Northwest, you can see where that happens, right? Like you can see in the Cascades, where in the western side of the Cascades, you would much rather spend your winter. You're going to get green grass in the western portion of the Cascades. Whereas in the eastern portion of the Cascades, your nice hot summers are going to be nice and fun, but you don't want to spend your winters there. So if you're a herd of deer and you have your summer pasture in the east and your winter pasture in the west, and you're crossing this mountain pass, and one year in this cross, there's a landslide and now you're separated and you're two separate herds of deer. Over periods of time, you're going to adapt to the space that you're in. So the people or the deer on the western side, especially in the Pacific Northwest, they're going to have really hard winters where they didn't have hard winters before. The Cascades really divides that. And so now in their winters, they're might gonna have like a white tail so that they can kind of disguise through these long winters. They didn't have snow before because on the west side of the Cascades, you don't get snow until recently. And so they're going to evolve with a white tail. They might also evolve with a thicker layer of fat for winter storage and a thicker layer of fur. Whereas on the west side, where it's green year round, you're going to see that they probably don't have a whole lot of like shift. Maybe they have like a heavier coat during the winter, or they start adjusting their coat over the year. Um, or maybe, they adapt to carry more water because they get more water. There might be different adaptations, but these different adaptations in the two separate species, because they've narrowed their genetics. You can only take some of the genetics on this side and some of the genetics on this side, right? They've narrowed their genetics and they've adapted with those genetics to the area they're in. They become two separate species. As humans, we're probably not going to become another separate species because we adapt our adaptations instead of adapting to the environment, and because we're never isolated. The Sentinelese might become another species in another 100,000, 200,000 years, but it takes a couple, like 100,000 years really to speciate, right? Um, it is the two separate species that we see having a recent common ancestor that gives the ability to breed two separate species, like we see with donkeys and horses having mules. Every once in a while, a mule will be fertile and pass on their genetics. And this is what happened in the breeding between Homo sapiens and Neanderthals. Every once in a while, one of the children is fertile and passes on its genetics. Yes, the Y chromosome is fading in our species, and it seems to have disappeared in Neanderthal. It doesn't mean that a new species will take over. What it means is that that chromosome will be replaced by a new chromosome. And the photo is what I'm talking about because the photo is a Neanderthal, and we're talking about Neanderthals. Okay, so I think that's good on there. Let me go ahead and go over these ones. I thought all species originate in Africa. All Homo species originate in Africa, except for species that come from Homo species. So, what this means is Homo erectus originates in Africa, but Homo neanderthalis, originating from a group of Homo erectus who has left Africa in Europe, originates in Europe. Neanderthal never makes it into Africa. Neanderthal is in Europe the entire time. They're not meant for Africa. They overheat. They're short and they're stocky and compact so that they can retain their heat. They don't have the ability to get rid of their heat. And so they would overheat and die. So you're seeing that their children and their grandchildren may be going into Africa, but they themselves are not going into Africa. And we believe the same with Denisovians that they originate outside of Africa. Homo florensis on the island of Flores speciates in Flores from Homo erectus. Homo erectus again coming from Africa, but Homo florensis speciating from Homo erectus within the island of Flores, never making it off the island of Flores. Same thing with Lizonsis. And same thing with trying to make sure Longi. Okay. We're seeing species that their parents come from Africa as a species. Their species parent comes from Africa, but they themselves never made it to Africa. Uh, which I mean, think, somebody from Africa today, three generations down, and their child has never made it to Africa, right? But we are definitely seeing that the origin of Homo species is absolutely in Africa, and the origin of the Homo sapien species, especially us, is absolutely in Africa. Society based on individualism is absolutely very lonely. I agree with that 100%. Jay asks, can I do a video on genomics, ancient DNA, and origins of modern populations? I have a couple of videos that do go over the genomics of ancient DNA as much as I personally can, and the origins of modern populations. And I'm working on more. The problem is there's a lot of things that I'm working on. There's a lot of things that I work on. And so it's hard to get a little bit more out there. Question by my information or knowledge, we are all family in one way or another around the world. Absolutely. Absolutely. We are all one species. We are all one family. So when you look at mitochondrial DNA, LDNA is the earliest DNA of mitochondrial lines that's currently in existence. This means that there were DNA lines before that that have died out: A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, right? So everything up before L has died out, and L has a mitochondrial Eve. And what this means is, say a woman has three daughters, um, and she has them by three different fathers, and they get their father's mother's mitochondrial DNA, right? and daughter A with father A passes on mother's mitochondrial grandmother's paternal grandmother's mitochondrial DNA A. Okay. B is daughter B and C is daughter C, right? And again, they're passing on their paternal grandmother's mitochondrial DNA, right? So as daughter A grandchildren have no children. Daughter B, I'm her grandchild, right? She has children all the way down, right? And daughter C has children for a couple 100,000 years and then stops having children. Okay. So they are the mitochondrial first of these lines, the mitochondrial Eve. You can trace it back, right? See with daughter A, when her mitochondrial DNA fades out, another one from the original replaces it, and that becomes a new mitochondrial Eve. It's not the easiest thing for me to understand, so it might not be the best of explanations. But basically, you can trace all mitochondrial DNA back to a mitochondrial Eve who, had a mother, right? But she is the earliest of that mitochondrial DNA, right? Because that is a combination of her mother and father's. My mitochondrial DNA is a combination of my father's mother's DNA and my mother's DNA, right? Because as a female, I get my X from my father's mother and my X from my mother, right? And it is those two X's together that pass on combined mitochondrial DNA from me to the next generation, okay? And so that would make me, if everybody else in my family dies out, that makes me the mitochondrial Eve of the next generations, right? So when we're tracing back mitochondrial DNA, what we can see is that L is our current earliest mitochondrial DNA, but we all trace back to it, right? We all originate there, right? All the genetics of the human species are in the Khoisan population of Africa. We know that we all come from the Khoisan population of Africa. All originating as the Khoisan population of Africa means that we are all one family. We are all one species. We are all one group. Race doesn't exist, culture exists, but our family line all traces back to the same space and the same group of people. We are cousins. And when we can treat each other like the cousins we are, like we've been treating each other for 300 or 290,000 years until the 10,000-year-old advent of narcissistic god kings and othering, then we can do better for each other, right? Yeah, her mother could have been intersex. Or, okay, so like, again, I get an X from my mother and my father's mother's X. Say, and it's not half, but say I take the bottom half of my mother's X and the top half of my father's mother's X, I combine and I make my own X. This makes me the mitochondrial Eve of this X, right? Because it is a combination of my mother's X and my father's X, this specific mitochondrial, right? Um, and that's my understanding. It could be different. If you're a geneticist, it might be different, but we are all one. Hello, Alex, the 7-year-old ghost. Johan Ross. When you took your DNA, you did not have any Neanderthal DNA, however, did have European, German, Scottish DNA. So currently in the link tree, though it will be transferred over at the very bottom of it on the link tree, is DNA sites that you can download the GED file from 23andMe or Ancestry or whatever you use for your genomics and upload to those sites, and it'll give you a better breakdown. What it's telling you is not. So first, it didn't take a full genome spectrum. It took like maybe 25% of your genetics, and it tested based on those 25%. And then when it relates you to modern populations, it's relating you to modern populations. So say it's relating you to the Cherokee population. It's relating you to a European, a majority European population, right? Because Cherokee has such an admixture of European within it that it might be that it's relating you to some Scottish person that's within the Cherokee admixture not to the Cherokee DNA itself. So I would upload it to those other sites that I have just so that you can, yeah. So, but I would upload it to those sites because then you can take a look. Not only can you take a look, but those sites will tell you where your African heritage is specifically, which the other site will not tell you your specific African American heritage. So you'll find it at GD Match and your DNA portal and my true ancestry. They're at the very bottom of my link tree. They're very good ones for figuring out where your DNA goes and what your DNA is, right? Um, and that might be something fun. Um, but remember, it's still only testing. That what you've gotten is only like a percentage of your genome. It's not a whole genome. Costs at minimum like $300 to do a whole genomic testing. It's pretty fucking high. So I think that is all for the questions. Let's go ahead and move into language and hearing within Neanderthals and how we understand this. So I fell in love with Neanderthals when I was 12. Again, backwoods, off grid, all of the things that I learned to read in were my mother's archaeological texts and history texts that she got from different Black and Indigenous authors. Should not have pulled that down. And I didn't really get a chance to see a lot of other things until I left. But at one point, I went and I stayed with my grandmother for a summer. And this is the grandmother that raised my mother. She had a very big, deep faith of her heritage. Like she knew that she was African heritage. She knew that her grandmother was a slave. And she knew of her Turtle Island indigenous heritage, though, because her father had left very early, they didn't know specifics of the Turtle Island indigenous heritage. But with that said, she grew up with a lot of love for indigeneity and Black heritage, and she grew up with a lot of love for paleoanthropology as well, or my grandmother did. And so when I would go and visit her, I would find a lot of information about different things like that. Like she didn't have books on, you know, things like she didn't have indigenous books in her house, but what she did have were things on things like passing and different things that her grandmother and her mother had to go through. And so with those things, I got a lot of information, but I really started to see paleoanthropology. She had one of those old coffee table books on Neanderthals, and it is one of my earliest memories, and I love it. It is so gorgeous to me to take the time to try and understand other species and try and understand ourselves through it because it really relates us to just being another being, right? To just being another species here on the planet. Um, and so I had an early love for Neanderthals, but for the longest time, we seem to think that Neanderthals were this grunting, if anything, species that had no language, that had no art. We, Clan of the Cave Bear, related them to the idea of worshiping of cave bears and early, what's the word I'm looking for? Hallucinogenics. But we did not relate them as having deeper art and deeper speech. Jean M. All did in a really great way, but even then, she did not relate them as having extensive speech. In about 2013, 2017, 2017, they found a Neanderthal hyoid bone. The Neanderthal hyoid bone that they found really changed our understanding of Neanderthal as being able to speak. Before that, we had conversations about whether or not they could, but we didn't have any definitive evidence of whether or not they could. And that gave us that definitive evidence. That definitive evidence changes the entire perception of Neanderthal, and it also changes the way we look at different things. We're also starting to understand that you can see the imprint of speech patterning of the brain on the base of the skull. Like your brain presses against your skull, and the pathways that it takes for you to be able to speak are seen in the imprint at the base of your skull here. Um, and so when we're looking at that, it tells us that they not only have the ability to speak, but they have the ability of advanced speech. We also see this within their lung capacity. As we were talking about earlier, I get short of breath sometimes because I have long COVID. And actually, I've got long COVID related asthma. And then I have some mental health things that make it a little bit harder sometimes too. But the way that we talk and our ability to force air through our voice box in a syllabic vibration is directly correlated to the capacity and the way our chest is positioned for our lungs. So I can speak because the way that my lungs are positioned within my chest and the way that the musculature moves, the lungs and the rib cage pushes air through my voice box and causes these vibrations. And I can speak and breathe at the same time, right? I can speak for hours on end and still be able to catch my breath as long as I don't have fucking diseases, right? So we see with this advanced speech within Neanderthal. They have the rib capacity, they have the brain imprint, and they have a hyoid bone. We also see this within Homo erectus. We don't find a hyoid bone of Homo erectus, but we do see it within the imprint of the brain on the skull, and we do see it within the rib capacity. This is the really amazing thing that starts our understanding that Neanderthal has really the ability for all the things that we think that we have, right? So you have the ability for speech. We've recently found what looks like writing within Neanderthals. They found a bone that has some very deliberate marks that look like a counting of something, right? There's repetitive marks. And it looks like it is not repetitive, like as in a pattern, but repetitive is in like the same mark. Hey, beautiful. It's good to see you. Um, and that gives us an indication of them actually using writing to do accounting of things. This means that our earliest form of writing may predate the Egyptians. Everybody wants to say it's cuneiform. It is not. The Egyptians have our earliest form of writing currently. But this means that our earliest form of writing could absolutely predate the Egyptians and go back to the Neanderthals. With everything else that we know about Neanderthals, it's very possible. We'll get into a lot of these things, but we're talking about a people who have art, who have medicine, who have science, who have decoration of self with clothing, who have all of these wide variety of things that we currently have today, that we think of today as being innately human and that we think of as being so advanced, but we've had them ourselves for a long time. Neanderthal had them too. And we'll get into the micros of those. But all of these come with that advanced language. All of these come with the concept the advanced language gives us. Comes with the morphology, not morphology, but changes in brain structure that advanced language gives us, and the ability to impart ideas that advanced language gives us. Now, I do want it to be understood that language is in all species, language is in the trees. The trees have language. They're able to communicate with each other through their roots and chemical signature. We have found that trees are matriarchal clans. They have families, and that when you get together a bunch of matriarchal clan families, you get a nation, a forest, and they're all able to intercommunicate. We know that cats communicate. We know that dogs communicate. We know that all animals really communicate. And many methods of communication are actually more advanced. You can understand a lot more through sensory and through visual cues than you can often through verbal speech. Also, it's a little bit easier to lie in verbal speech than it is in sensory and visual cues, right? You can't really deceive with that, but you can deceive with verbal speech. We have a discussion of pronouns in the YouTube chat, and it's pretty awesome. I use she, he, and we because I'm part of the we. And because, well, half the time I feel like a she and half the time I feel like a we or he, you can never tell whether I feel like a she or a he because I don't think any of this has anything to do with it. I mean, Pink started out as male, as did makeup and heels. So our idea of gender construct is pretty new and pretty narrow. Um, and so I don't really I like them all personally, and I like the we. To me, that is impactful because to me it indicates that broader space that we're within. Um, so We can't tell what Neanderthal speech sounded like. We can possibly, um, well, no, I don't even think with that. So I know that they have done things where they have a voice box, like they had Tutankhamun, I think it was Tutankhamun's voice box, and they were able to do a 3D printing of the voice box, and they were able to do a recreation of what his voice sounded like because of that. Grand cat is on the table behind me, but we don't have a voice box of Neanderthal, right? That's because Tutankhamun mummified, right? It's not because of the bone structure. Like you can't get that off a hyoid bone. You have to have the tissue that is still there, right? Which we don't have with Neanderthals. So the likelihood of being able to recreate the sound of a voice is also pretty low, right? Unless we find something. So we're not going to know what their speech patterns were. We will know that they use syllabic speech like we do, right? We're not going to know what their language was, and we're not going to know how they themselves sound. But we do know that it was there. You need to get down. Come on. Thank you. With that, I would posit that since most early languages have a tendency to sound like the environment that they're developing in, um, and even language today really sounds like the environment that developed in, like the trill of a speech might sound like the trill of a bird in an environment, or might sound like the typical forest sounds that you hear in an environment for a forest people might sound like a typical desert sounds that you hear in an environment for a desert people when we're looking at indigenous people. Um, meet Grand Cat. He's extremely invasive and needs attention all the time. So when we are looking at that, what we're seeing is that their early language probably sounded like the environment they're in. You're going to hear a lot of sounds of the animals around you, and you're going to hear a lot of environmental sounds. We hear this today in some of the languages that we trace back as our earliest languages. We know that the Khoisan population is the most genetically diverse, and so that's how we know that it's the original population. But we also know that the Khoisan population has the oldest language. And then one of the other oldest languages that we have is over in Australia, or maybe Australasia. So we know that these are oldest languages because they're click languages. They have clicks, they have different environmental sounds within them that we don't necessarily have within our languages today, right? All the kitties, all the kitties. He is definitely a part of this life. So these are kind of our little understandings about Neanderthal. We also understand that Neanderthal's inner ear, which is how we get most of our DNA actually these days, is that bone from the inner ear, the meatus bone. Um, the shape of that tells us that Neanderthal heard the same vibrational frequencies that we hear, which means that their language vibrational frequencies would have been on the same language vibrational frequencies ours are, because that's what they were hearing, right? I'm going to go ahead and open up again for comments and questions. Um, this early live with these two subjects do not have a whole, like, I mean, there are a lot of information, but they're not in-depth information on a lot of things. Oh, I think we were talking about the Boynier jawbone, and I did get distracted with some questions. But the Boynier jawbone is a jawbone that they found in the late 1800s because of its long exposure out from underneath, its burial. They're unlikely to ever get DNA out of it, right? But what they're seeing is a jawbone that has no derived or only Neanderthal characteristics, but also, and seems to be Homo sapien in many things, but also doesn't have the mental eminence of a chin. So this could either be Homo sapien breeding with a different species or an entirely different species that we haven't found yet. This could be an entirely new hominin species. Will modern man evolve? Modern man is already evolving. We won't species it into separate species, though, because we do not isolate, and we do not, we adapt our adaptations. We don't adapt to our surroundings anymore. So we are currently evolving. Oh, good goddess, you're making this difficult, little one. What about their inner nose? So we haven't gone over what the structure of Neanderthal speciates into that gives them the different genetic characteristics that are really cool. So when Neanderthal speciates in Europe, Neanderthal speciates specific to Europe. So it speciates short and stocky, right? This retains heat. Your epidermis, one second. I hope this does not make the internet have issues. We'll see. I apologize. And I apologize for the tracking camera. Um, they do have kind of a different sinus structure, not necessarily that we know that they have like different paths in their sinuses, but I'll go into that. So you personally don't evolve. I would hope you evolve. If you don't personally evolve, that means that you never change and grow. And change and grow is a huge part of human nature. Um, and I would say, I mean, all of us evolve. You are not the same person you were when you were 5, are you? Not the same person you were when you were 20. I hope, because most of us at 20 are idiots, right? You had to take a second and learn some shit and grow. That's what evolution is. It's growing. You're currently evolving, right? And if you are the same person that you were at 5, then I would suggest that you need some help in learning how to adult so that you're not forcing other people to take care of you. Because that's a very self-centered viewpoint at 5, right? It's very hyper focused on yourself and you have no idea of taking care of anybody else. You have no need to take care of anybody else. You are the center of the world at 5. And if you haven't changed that thought process, it means that you're not taking care of the people around you, which means you're kind of a leech. Just saying. I did have a lovely holiday. So I'm not judging. You're the one that said you don't evolve. In judging other people, you evolved, I didn't evolve. You're judging and you don't like the return judgment. You can report. Go right ahead. I'm sorry, everybody. You can find me over on YouTube. I'll probably only be live banned for a couple hours because really that's not what that was. So, anyways, if it goes blank, you will find me still over on YouTube until 10. Anyways, so when we oh, they said they did evolve, and I said you're not the same person you were when you were 5, because at 5 we're so you're self-centric, like the world revolves around us at 5, right? Um, anyways, sorry, it distracted me, and I know it happens, and I apologize. That's why we turn them off. The boy in your job means that we could have an entirely new species out there that we did not know about. We haven't found it, right? It's hard for me to ignore. Sorry, it just is. I engage. That's why we turn the comments off. Um, that whole new species means, or if it's a whole new species, it can mean a lot of different things. Uh, and then the other thing, no, I think that was it. I think that was the only other one that I wanted to touch on. Um, if you aren't evolving, you aren't living. That's right. Lucy is about 3 million years ago. So prior to Homo habilis is Lucy, Ardipithecus. And we actually see Homo naledi seems to have the upper body of Lucy, like an Ardipithecus upper body. So it's pretty cool. If I swipe right, the comments don't disappear. If you swipe right, the comments disappear. If I swipe right, the comments just don't disappear. So I always like, and I have response issues. I always engage. It is definitely an issue I have. Oh, sorry, my nose. Cat hair everywhere. So many cats, so many long hairs. What bounds in Europe were Neanderthal? Pretty much all of Eurasia was Neanderthal. And actually we see the most Neanderthal DNA in West Eurasia. So in Asia is where we see the most Neanderthal DNA, not in Europe, right? Which means that first of all, you get that interbreeding there in the Levant area, but so when they're traveling out, they're not going up northwest because it's still covered in ice. They're going east because it's free of ice. Um, and then you also get that we see Neanderthals and Denisovians. Like Russia is really, that Denisovia cave is like right up above the Levant area, kind of a little bit to the east. Like most of Neanderthal stuff is actually in, well, not most, but a good portion is actually in kind of East Eurasia, Middle East. And then you get a lot of Neanderthal within Europe proper, from the Mediterranean all the way up to Britain, but not in like Ireland or Scandinavia. Lucy creates life or continues life just like we do. Same interbreeding. Same like, I mean, all mammal species really create life in the same way. We do see a couple species have lost their Y DNA in rodents. We saw that Neanderthals lost their Y DNA, but they're still breeding the same way. There's still a male and there is still a female, and those two are still having intercourse, and it is the intercourse that is creating the next life. It just has different alleles, maybe. Mickey, I don't know. I'm not going with that. I don't know what you're trying to do. That really seems like racism to me. I'm not appreciative. There have not been any Neanderthals in the Americas, but we do have Neanderthal DNA in the Americas because of the fact that Turtle Island indigenous people passed through Neanderthal territory. You know, they're in the Levant too. They don't leave and go to Turtle Island until after the 50,000 years ago. Um, Evidence shows that they're here by 30,000 years ago, maybe 40,000 years ago. But evidence also shows that they bred with Denisovians for 10,000 years after they leave the Levant area at 50,000 years ago. So, theory is fact until it's no longer fact. Theory is something that has been proven by testing. To get to the state of theory, it has been proven. Otherwise, it's a hypothesis. So, if you're trying to state that it's me making shit up, what you're stating is that this is my hypothesis. If you state that this is my theory, what you're stating is I've proven it to you. Just stating. So anytime you're like, this is just her theory, what you're stating is, I've proven my point to you and it is fact, because that's what a theory is. So, two close species can breed with each other if they have a recent common ancestor. This is how donkeys and horses are able to breed and produce a mule. Once in a while, a mule will have the ability to produce the next line, will be fertile. And I think it's like one in every 100 or one in every 500 mules is fertile. So, the same thing happens with the mix between Neanderthal and Homo sapiens and between Homo sapiens and Denisovians. You can breed and you can produce offspring, but not all of your offspring is viable. And of the viable offspring, only one in every 100 is producing the ability to produce offspring. Um, this is because we are two separate species and because we have a recent common ancestor, like donkeys and horses. Like ligers are a lion and a tiger, and every once in a while, one of them will be fertile. Every time they're fertile, they have to breed back to a specific portion of the prior species. So if the prior species that they have to breed, like say, so what we know is that it's Neanderthal females and Homo sapien males that are breeding and carrying on and passing on that DNA. And with the Neanderthal female and Homo sapien male passing on, what we're seeing is that it seems that the fertile offspring are female, and those female fertile offspring have to breed with a Homo sapien male because we see no Neanderthal Y DNA. And so what it seems is that it's a Neanderthal mother with a Homo sapien father, and the children that are actually fertile are female, and the children that are fertile have to breed with a Homo sapien. Do I think that there was a human species here in Turtle Island prior to the paleo turtle? You say paleo India, and I'm assuming you're meaning indigenous Turtle Islanders. Yes, I do. The 130,000-year-old Cerruti mastodon find would not be a Homo sapien find. It would be a Homo erectus find. It would be a species that speciated from Homo erectus. Um, I have my opinions on that, and I have my theories or my hypotheses on that. I've discussed them a few times. But they're hypothesis. They don't have weight yet. I have to do, they would require certain things to come to a point of weight that are not currently capable to get. But I would think that because there is megafauna all across Turtle Island, that the giants that were found in Turtle Island by early archaeologists and anthropologists that are talked about in Turtle Island within almost all indigenous groups, and that are actually global. We found giant skeletons globally, but the vast majority are here under mounds in Turtle Island. Um, I would think that those are most likely what Homo erectus speciated in, because we are in a space that has megafauna. Uh, Island giganticism and island dwarfism is what created the megafauna here in Turtle Island, and it would create a megafauna human as well. Please answer what happened to the Neanderthals. The Neanderthals were bred out. Their genetic diversity got so low and they mixed with us. We know some about their culture, but we're going to be going into those things in the next things. Right now, we're doing, I'm not false. All of my stuff is supported by evidence. I have a website in my bio that will take you to the evidence. Journal articles, all archaeological or all scientific journal articles. I have the stuff that'll take you to my evidence. All of my stuff has evidence behind it. They did find Neanderthal in Gibraltar. The Gibraltar cave Neanderthals is that mother and child Neanderthal. It's such a beautiful rendition. A 7-year-old boy, um, and a woman is their estimates. Thank you, Allison. I love the idea of the megafauna here too. That's good. Ah, homodulsmanska. I do get a lot of rude comments from religious folks. Neanderthals do have the occipital bun. Well, my nose ring should not impair your hearing. And people in scientific communities have no problem with my nose ring. It's only people who refuse knowledge and are looking for reasons to be ignorant that have a problem with my nose ring. You should never have a problem with how another human being chooses to decorate themselves. It's not up to you. And that's pretty egotistical for you to think that it should be up to your opinion. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and turn off the comments. Actually, I'm going to step out of the room really quick because I need to smoke so they don't throw up. Um, Give me a couple minutes. I'll be right back. I don't want to make it hard or triggering for anybody. Do I think we'll breed out by another species? No. But I'll be back in 2 seconds, and then I'm going to turn off the comments. I'm going to give you a chance to get the rest of your comments out. And then I'll be right back, and I will turn them off, and I'll read through them. Sorry, with the follow camera, that becomes harder, and I get pukey. What did I say that I finally said? I'm not sure what I finally said. Okay, so I'm going to turn this off and read through these. Do I think we'll be bred out by another species? No. We might evolve to be able to handle the lack of oxygen that's coming. We might die. We might fix the issue. I don't know. We are evolving, but we're not going to be a different species. Will we maybe evolve into what scientists in later times define as different species, like, Homo erectus evolves into Homo heidelbergensis and they're two separate species? Yeah, possibly. But we won't realize it. We won't realize at what point we've hit a different species when we're doing it as a whole. We'll just think we're just humans. We've already done it, right? Early Homo sapiens brains were structured like every other early hominin except for Naladi's brains. So early Homo brains are like this. This is the forehead, this is the spine, and this is the back. It sticks out like this, right? We started like that. And in about 40,000 years ago, we finished a transition into a brain structure like this, right? So As we look back, we can see that there's that difference between us prior to now, right? But at the time, we wouldn't have noticed the difference. We would have just thought our kids were a little bit smarter. Our kids looked a little bit different than our grandmother did, right? But not too different from us, right? When it's like when you have a child, when you have a grandchild, say, and you see them at 5 and then you don't see them again until 15. And that vast growth of difference that you see between 5 and 15 hits you, right? But as a parent, you don't see the difference between 5 and 15 every day. You don't see it until 15 and you're looking back at pictures of 5, right? So we're not going to notice these changes as much. I mean, we might now because we like micro examine ourselves, but it's not going to be as much of a, oh my God, we're a new species now. My child's a new species from me. It's not going to be like that. It's just evolution. It's just evolving. Thank you, German. Replying to somebody else says mere claims aren't valid arguments either. Thank you. And this is correct. I mean, if you would like to bring forth a valid argument, all of my stuff is got link trees. I'm absolutely down for you to bring in new information for me to actually find to support my shit or to not support my shit, to change my knowledge, right? I am always down to change my knowledge, but don't just come and throw a word at me. Sarah, that's incorrect because this shows this instead. That's a good way to debate something, right? That's not fact. This is what the fact is. You have to give something to state that I'm wrong. You can't just say lies and actually be heard. You have language, use it. Thank you. I love my septum. And actually, I went, so this is silver. It's a hammered dulcimer from Sweden, actually. And I went, or not dulcimer, but a hammered silver from Sweden. And I went specifically with that because it's something that could have been forged in any forge, right? It's hammered silver with a ball on it. And so it's something that could be forged at any time period. We've been doing piercings for God, I think like we see it within Neanderthals. So 60, 70,000 years, right? We'll be talking about that with jewelry. We see evidence of that really, really early on. So there's absolute thought process that we possibly, that we have this stuff that goes back generations and generations across the globe. And so I really tried to focus on stuff that was obvious heritage, right? And so I went with a hammered one from Sweden. I really enjoy it. Do you think we will breed out by another? Okay, I already did that one. I said Neanderthal mother and human father. We don't see a Neanderthal Y DNA. We can't find a Neanderthal Y DNA. Not in us and not in Neanderthals. I love getting religious people mad. I agree. It's amusing. So they tend to like specific groups of human beings tend to throw punches while they're saying that somebody's hitting them. Oh, I don't want to be hot. Please don't think of me as hot on any. I mean, not offensive to you. I just am not looking. You are correct, Nomus, and that's why I love it. It's an English translation of indigenous phrase that is used along the eastern seaboard mainly by many different groups. Turtle Island is the word for North America because if you look at it from above, it looks like a turtle. But also the stories in many groups talk about the co-creation of this land between the animals and Sky Woman, and that co-creation of the good green earth, right? Which gives them the garden that they tend. And it's created on a turtle back. That's the also, sorry. I lost on the thought process. Okay. I do not have more than one nose ring. It's the only one that I found that I liked. Like I tried a couple different ones. I have one that I actually wear in my ear that I didn't like on my nose because it didn't hang right on my nose. It was too tight. This is the one that I found with the way that it's pierced that works, and it's just the one I know. Okay. So I did already smoke. Sorry, Dan. I had to step out. I was getting nauseous. It's hard. So those are really my thoughts when it comes to genetics and the DNA and that we're finding, and when it comes to hearing and speech patterns within Neanderthals or speech within Neanderthals. Uh, Again, I'm trying to stay focused on just a couple of different things on these lives so that we can get through information. It's a little bit better to have plenty of time for questions than to have a live that I have to go for 4 hours to get all the information out, right? Um, and so I want to make sure that we're sticking just to those things. We will be talking about Neanderthal jewelry and Neanderthal art starting on Friday at 8 a.m. We have one more live on this subject, which will be tomorrow night, Wednesday at 8 p.m. These are both Pacific Standard Time. Um, and with that, we're going to do our final live on this subject tomorrow night at 8 p.m. The switch over into jewelry and decoration of living quarters, caves, cave art will be moving for a week as well. We'll do 4 lives on it. By the end of this week, I will have my first publication out for free on Amazon. It is the first chapter of a short series of chapters on rights. This first chapter is on the right to life, and this first chapter is dealing with what the right to life actually entails. One thing that we don't often understand and realize is that all rights come with a responsibility. We think that rights are free, and they're not. And I don't mean that there's something that you have to pay for or something you have to trade for. What I mean is that to ensure that my right to life is upheld, I have to uphold your right to life. If I am not holding your right to life the same as my right to life, why should I expect you to hold my right to life over your right to life? Right? A lot of right there, right? But that's the real of it. We have responsibilities that we are not upholding that come with our rights. Okay. And those responsibilities are to ensure that other beings have those rights. Otherwise, they're not inalienable. They're not given. If they're only mine, they're not inalienable. So that is what our first is on. We will go into liberty or bodily autonomy next. And I'm planning on putting out one a month. If you get 5,000 people to buy something, it goes on the bestseller list. If you can get 5,000 people in a week to buy something, it goes on the bestseller list. I have 20,000 followers. I'm really, really hoping that I can get at least a quarter of you to buy this within a week. It is going to, again, be for free. It's a digital copy. It's 15 pages so far. It's small. It's bite-sized to read, right? It's made in a quick reading ability because bite size is the best way to get information these days. It's how we're programmed these days. And if we can get that word out there, that is what is important to me. I'm not doing this for money. I'm not doing this for the likes. I'm not doing this for the followers, other than the idea that every person who follows is a person who's gotten the message. And I'm not giving you that message so you will follow me, worship me, think of me as anything other than a traumatized, injured fucking human, just like everybody else who is just struggling to ensure that the next generations don't have to deal with this injury anymore. I'm trying to break the cycle, and I just want people to help me with it. Because if I can get you to understand that this negative, nasty, all you are is evil is not innately who you are, that you are innately nurturing and you are innately communal and you are innately curious, and is the lack of those things in your life that is creating that loneliness, that depression, that horror within you. It is the lack of those things within the physical things that you intake, like your food, which is going to be in this, that is a part of what's killing you right now. And why, deeply internally, anybody who is not disconnected fully with something like the dark triad and a lack of empathy is hurting as they watch the world burning. So please, once I publish it, please get it out there as much as we can so that people can see. And that maybe, and once you read this, you will understand this, maybe we can change our ability to function within our right to life. Because the right to life not only comes with a responsibility, but comes with a few things that we need to uphold our right to life, especially in modern society. Water is a right to life. Okay. So, all of that said, that's my main focus right now. Um, so I'm only doing lives. Occasionally I've posted a couple videos because something's been interesting. God, one of them really took off. I had like an epiphany question about the Y DNA, and that one's going sky high so far, thankfully. But that's it for today. Again, I will be back tomorrow night, Wednesday PM, 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I will go ahead and put up a live event after I'm done with this. I forgot to do for this one until this morning when I was less than 2 hours out. I apologize. And I will be back Wednesday. And then again, I will be back Friday morning when we will switch topics, still Neanderthals, but we will be talking about jewelry and art within Neanderthals. And then we'll do 4 on that. And by the end of this week, we'll have a publication. Also, new websites up. I am transferring over all the links so that they're in a more orderly format so that you can find sources. And hopefully it's going to take me a minute to get it transferred over with doing everything else as well. So it probably won't get fully transferred until next week. But the link tree is linkable there as well at the very top of the page. Have a blessed evening, afternoon. It's my partner's day off, so I get to go and nest and have fun. And I hope you all do. Remember at this time of year, if you are in a hemisphere where it's midwinter, that this is the time of year of renewal. This is where you shed the old and you move forward with the new. And as you're moving forward into this next space, do it with as much intent of blessing for the world and yourself as possible. For all blessings that go to the world will pop back onto you, right? If energy interacts, that can only be true. And as you're moving forward with that thought, remember to love yourself and give yourself grace, right? Remember to love yourself and give yourself grace as you shed that off. There's a lot of trauma that you have to recover from. And remember that it's okay to sink in your safe zones, and feel that and recover and move forward with positive intent and blessing. Hey, DeCraig. Okay, love you all. Have a great night. See you later. Bye. takes me a second. Adore you guys. Thank you guys for popping over here and ensuring that we can keep this going over here in case, shit happens over there. I'm going to go and ban you today. Um, and I will again be back tomorrow night. And I will see you guys soon. I'm probably not going to post it as a live event here because it's hard for me to like go live from the live event here. It doesn't translate through. It's really weird. But I will be live at the same time and I will post the live event in TikTok. And then I'm working on getting this over on a couple other platforms as well, like Spotify and stuff. So have a great one, you all. Have a great one, you all. Bye.